Okay, welcome to today's episode of the Academy. Today I'm going to take a kind of a lighthearted look at something I think is an extremely important aspect or factor in the making of a good tabletop journal. So I jokingly refer to this one as lactose intolerance. Essentially, I'm going to go through cheese in military history and then see how does that translate to the table and what do you do about it. I think there's a healthier way to deal with it than crying cheese. Okay, I'll be the first to admit, having seen and having the new Tau Codex, I was very disappointed with some of the things they added to it. In my opinion, they had a few tweaks they could have done to keep the power level the way it was. Maybe add some more variety or increase some of the powers of some of the, like the crude, something to make the more of the units a little more viable. But of course, they went over the top, and of course, everyone cries cheese on it. That's fun. That got me thinking. What is it like in the real world? So let's trace through some history here. Let's go back Middle Ages. We have, excuse me, the Welsh longbow and bodkin arrow. Start there. Now, the Welsh longbow, we can really talk about any longbow because extremely strong pull, over 100 pounds for a normal archer, and that's going to send a yard-long arrow quite a distance, one of the longest arrow shots in battle. Now, bodkin arrow has been around for quite a few centuries and eventually went away when gunpowder started taking over the battlefield. Why? Well, the bodkin arrow was designed to pierce armor. Now, everybody thinks that, knights in armor, this heavily plated knights, and that's not what the bodkin arrow was devised for. It was designed for and was extremely capable of piercing through chain. The longer ones could actually pierce through chain without really busting the link, but most of them would just bust the link open. So the most common armor in use, being chainmail, was defeated by the bodkin arrow, whereas most of the broadheads would bounce off. Well, you end up with a line of archers, a huge block of archers, firing these bodkin arrows, and your opponent is mostly in chainmail. You're going to do some damage. Of course, if that's all you've got to wear is chainmail, you don't have real fancy plate, it's not good for you. So fast forward to Battle of Agincourt, perfect example. Now, most people, again, think French knights all clad in plate mail, but again, that's not true. The armor worn was always dependent upon the wealth of the individual. So most were still going to be covered with chainmail, a couple plates augmenting. You take an arrow shot to any part of the body, and I guarantee you're not going to be too comfortable. You'll be wounded. You'll probably be taken out of the battle. You might be stunned. Of course, in the chest and torso or whatever, head, you're going to take damage. Most of the knights weren't in the newest plate mail. That was pretty good at, I wouldn't say it's proof against the bodkin, but it definitely was able to withstand the typical arrow shot. Most of them, though, didn't have that. There were plenty of gaps in the armor, plenty of chain, and they were able to take it. So you had English footmen, English archers, French knights, and the French knights cried cheese because they just could not handle the Welsh longbowmen with their bodkin arrows. Let's fast forward a century or so, and that plate mail developed to become hardened steel. It was tempered. It was very high quality. And now the bodkin arrow was not all that useful. In fact, what used to be cheese now was pretty much useless against the typical knight. Again, your experts were the knights with that heavy armor. Your levies, the bulk of the forces were still footmen that didn't have a lot of armor experience, or heck, they might be unarmored. But the bodkin arrow was still useful. But there was no way that bodkin arrow was going to take down a knight or mercenary in that hardened plate steel. So now all of a sudden the archers are crying cheese. No fair. Well, let's move over to the east, in the Orient. In naval combat, I my mind's going blank. I forget which centuries, but the Japanese and Koreans and Chinese, their naval battles were much like the Greeks or Vikings. You come up alongside, you send the Marines overboard, and you have a hand-to-hand fight. It's basically a land battle on the water. Well, that's great if your opponent does the same thing. And so one day the Japanese Navy's coming out to engage the Korean Navy. Korean Navy comes out with a new invention, and the cry goes up from the Japanese Navy, cheese. Very reminiscent of the Tau versus Orc. What you've got here is the Koreans developed the turtle ship. You can find many examples of this online. But it was devised as a completely sealed hull. So there was actually a roof over it. And that roof was solid wood, and the roof had iron spikes, which made it a little more hazardous for boarding parties coming on. And because it was roofed, there's no way for the boarding parties to get into the crew and do any damage. Making it worse is these Korean turtle ships had cannon, which the Japanese fleet didn't. And so they were able to pester and decimate the Japanese ships as the Japanese Marines stood there kind of thinking, what could we do? There's no way we can defeat these. So, again, cheese saved the day, for the Koreans anyway. Now, let's fast forward many centuries. Let's go into World War II. World War I. What began as a very important branch of the military for reconnaissance and intelligence gathering became a deadly form of combat in and of itself, and that's air combat. Started out in 1913, 1914, early 15, with rifles and revolvers shooting pilots and observers shooting each other. Some of the planes were, of course, by 1914, later had swivel mounts on the observer with machine guns. They could do something, but it's very hard to hit in 3 dimensions on an airplane in that fashion. All of a sudden, someone decides to put a machine gun right on the cowling, so now they can aim the airplane and shoot down the opponent. Of course, they had to worry about the propeller. There's a couple ways to defeat that. Garros came up with a wedge. Fokker came up with synchronization gear. Either way, you had a machine gun pointed forward, and now all of a sudden, the reconnaissance pilots are crying cheese because the enemy now had machine guns that they could point just by pointing the airplane at the opponent. Now, fast forward just a couple years, and suddenly these huge metal boxes start rolling across the British lines toward the German trenches. And all of a sudden, a collective cry goes up from the German trenches, cheese! These tanks are coming, taking out German positions, moving forward. They can't be stopped, at least not in the beginning. And all of a sudden, there's breakthroughs. And now, granted, tanks could be wrecked, and they did. They weren't invulnerable, but they were extremely effective, and there was no answer from the Germans in those initial battles. So that is extremely unfair. Very cheesy a way to approach warfare. Skip a couple decades, and now you got World War II. That war was filled with cheese. But I'm just going to give one big example. And to highlight it, we're going to talk about the Halfaya Pass in North Africa, where, within the span of just a few minutes, the heaviest, or most heavily armed tank that the British had fielded, it was an infantry support tank, but still, the strongest armor that was on the field in any army, began Operation Battle Axe to move through the Halfaya Pass. And in the span of a few minutes, 11 of those 12 tanks were destroyed by just a handful of German 88s. Here's an anti-aircraft weapon that, when leveled at the tanks, was fantastic. Their allies had no response to the 88. Matter of fact, the 88 was what was armed in the Tiger tank, which made it lethal. So that 88 became German cheese, and all through the Allied armies, they were screaming cheese, and actually they were screaming tiger, but they were screaming cheese, just like we do around the gaming table sometimes. So now you look at that, and you have a single gun battery. I think it was probably about 4 guns or so, taking out 11 tanks. It's essentially a one shot per type of situation. Any armor could be penetrated. Sherman's could be penetrated later in the war, and matter of fact were. Operation Goodwood in the Cayenne. I don't know how to pronounce some of these French names, but Caen, that village. Dozens of tanks taken out by 88s, and it was the 88s were first used to take out the bombers that were sent in. Then after the bombers were gone, they leveled them back down and started taking out tanks. So here we have a single weapon system that anytime it was on the battlefield reigned supreme against any armor that came up against it. That is modern cheese. Fast forward now, I'm going to put a link in the description below to a video that really showcases this. But we cry cheese every time someone gets the invisibility power. Well, I'm going to draw your attention to the first night, I want to say it was January 17th in 91, Operation Desert Storm, when the American Air Forces were targeting Baghdad proper and certain communications targets in Baghdad. If you see the videos, there's tracer fire going up hundreds and hundreds. I want to say it was like 1,300 anti-air guns firing up into the skies of Baghdad, and they didn't hit a single thing because the radar couldn't latch on to anything, but they knew they were up there. And that was the F-117 stealth fighter bomber, really. Talk about cheese. The entire population of Baghdad was crying cheese that night. And also that night, there was cheese being just shouting from all over Iraq, and where cruise missiles were flying right over the kind of nape of the earth, right over the terrain, from hundreds of miles away, actually being fired from the Persian Gulf, landing on their target. No one's aiming these things. They're guided missiles. I guess that's what you call them, missiles. Cruise missiles, duh. So they're programmed to hit something, and they're using GPS and the topography and digital maps to get to their destination, make course corrections, and hit the target they've been programmed for. Talk about cheese. That's almost Eldar. That even beats Tau. But we'll put Tau in here too. You see the pilots, the bombers, going through all over the place, hitting very strategic targets. And what do you see but a camera screen with a little dot in the middle of it on the target? And then suddenly the screen goes black with this huge flash, and the target's destroyed. What was happening there? A Tau marker light. Oh, sorry, no, it was not a Tau marker light. It was one of our own marker lights, a laser guided, designated marker on that target that the missile was homing in on. Modern day marker light. And of course, everyone cried out cheese. So, we look at some of these things that come out and we get frustrated. We're used to fair play, equal sides, and all that kind of stuff from from sports. Talked about that in my earlier Academy video. Well, reality war isn't like that. So, why do I bring this up? Well, you know what? What makes a good general, good commander, whether it's real or tabletop, is how he responds to this cheese. So, I want to talk about, we'll call it a more rational way of dealing with cheese, or you might even say lactate for gamers. Think about it. You've got countless codexes out there that have a lot of different elements that can be put together by creative or maybe not so creative players. They're very cheesy. We talk about cheesy lists all the time. So you have a choice. In real life, Commander doesn't have a choice. He has to figure out a way to deal with that. He can't complain. There's no use to complain. Command's not going to hear it. They don't want excuses. They want the job done. So let's take that approach too. Let's not complain. Let's not get all bent out of shape because there's cheese. Personally, I like cheese. There's a lot of it I like. I don't mean the gaming kind. Because though the gaming kind is great, I prefer some others. But anyway, I digress. Every single weapon system, every single unit, regardless of what codex comes from, has a weakness. Some weakness may be hard to find. It may only have one weakness, but still everything's going to have weakness. Let's take the Land Raider, for example. Strongest armor in the game, 14 all around. There is no rear shot on it. But even when they put it in that formation that they got, I forget, it was a Land Raider spearhead or something, it still only takes one shot to blow it up. You hit it with a las cannon, or Melta, or Armor Bane, get a penetrating hit on it. All you need is a 6, plus 1 if it's AP2, plus 2 if it's AP1, and Land Raider's gone. It still has a weakness. Now, yeah, it may be hard to put enough of those type of weapons in your roster, but what about Melta Bombs, or the equivalent? Tank Buster Bombs for Orcs, for example. There's a lot of things that can do. Power Fists on the right unit. Now, Power Fists across the board don't always work, but Chain Fists, Kill Saws. There's always a way through that. What matters is how are you going to respond to this cheese? Are you going to complain and just, I'll say, whine about it? I guess wine and cheese go together very well, but in this case, it's a really, really, really bad thing. Because your attitude about cheese really affects how you play the game and the enjoyment you get out of it. When we read a history and we look at all the battles, the ones that stand out are the ones where the underdog or the outnumbered one won, defeating overwhelming firepower, overwhelming odds, you name it. Just that's the one we admire, we praise, we think of. That was so cool. Well, we're never going to be that person. We're never going to be that kind of commander if we just complain about cheese. We have to, just like they did, figure out what does it take to defeat that cheese, if you will, to melt it. Alexander went up against the Persians. He was outnumbered. He found a way to take the advantage away from the Persian army in this large field. ISIS is the name of the spelling of the battlefield. And he turned it against them. Marathon, again, Persians outnumbered. Persians outnumbered the Greeks. Greek general figured a way to turn the tables. The guy didn't sit there and complain, oh my goodness, I'm outnumbered, I'm going to lose. They've got all these great warriors, or these great weapons. No, they had a job to do. They had, in Alexander's case, he had to conquer the world. In the Greek space, they had to defend Athens, protect it, and that's what mattered. So they didn't complain. They looked at ways they could adapt and adjust. So try to take that attitude when you're addressing a cheesy list. Look at the game that you're playing, especially if it's a Maelstrom mission, because cheese of various types may not help you in a Maelstrom mission. So think about what does it take to win that particular mission. Look at the cheese that the opponent has, identify its weaknesses, and then put the heat on those weaknesses, melt the cheese, and you'll be a lot more successful. If you happen to win, then you get to bragging rights. That's what we'll call bragging rights. That is going to be a good thing when you you face up against the Necrons, you take out this 4-up, feel no pain army because you figured out a way to handle the cheese. Eldar coming at you with all these scatter bikes, and you figure a way to take out those bikes and neuter the Eldars. Wraith Knight's a good example. Big and scary, but it only has 6 wounds. It can be taken down with AP3, AP2. There's plenty of AP3, AP2 out there, and most of it's going to dish out wounds on 4+ on Wraith Knight. So, search, look at it. There's plenty of resources on the web. You got YouTube videos, you have blogs, you have wikis, you've got forums all over the place. Spend time looking at them. Ask questions. Look at how other players, watch bat reps. See how they handle the cheese. Study those cheesy lists. Sun Tzu made a comment about, if you want to win battles, you have to know yourself and your opponent. So you have to know why you're fighting. You have to know what's motivating your opponent, what they're capable of, and how you can defeat them. So you have to study your opponent's army, which means you have to invest some time. So don't complain about the cheese. Take it on. We used to like we like to use the adage, life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Well, if an opponent brings cheese to the table, make a grilled cheese sandwich out of it. All right? Have fun. I will share, like, subscribe, comment below on how you feel about cheese. How do you address it, or if you do. This is an emotional subject for a lot of gamers, but let's try to have a constructive dialogue about how do we deal with this. Ask questions of each other and offer solutions to some of those cheesy problems out there. Again, share, like, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next Academy video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.